All right, let's dive in. This time you've challenged us with a deep dive into Dr. Mohanad's teachings on preparing for Ramadan. I got to be honest, going through all these lectures, I was pretty surprised. Like, I thought I knew what Ramadan prep was all about, the food, the schedule, the whole bit. But this was different.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in just the physical side of things, isn't it? Dr. Mohanad really emphasizes that, sure, fasting from food and drink is important, but it's like the first step, the foundation. There's so much more to it.
Totally. He's all about this concept of taqwa, which I think is so key.
Right. Taqwa, it's usually translated as God consciousness, but it's kind of hard to capture the full meaning in English.
Yeah, God consciousness always felt a little clinical to me.
Exactly. It's more about striving to live in a way that pleases God, like aligning your thoughts and actions and even your intentions with what he wants.
I like that aligning with his guidance. It makes it more active, more intentional.
Right. And that's what Ramadan is all about, isn't it? Like it's not passive, it's not just about deprivation. It's about actively shaping yourself, improving yourself.
And one of the biggest things he talks about is willpower. He even calls Ramadan a school of willpower, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Think about it. You're facing those temptations all day long, and you're choosing to resist them. Not just for yourself, but, as an act of obedience to God.
Right. It takes serious discipline to do that day after day. And not just with food, right? It's about controlling those impulses, those urges that can pull you off track.
Exactly. And Dr. Mahana's point is that this willpower, it doesn't just disappear when Ramadan ends. It spills over into other parts of your life.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're actually building up this reserve of patience, of resilience that you can then draw on later, like in other areas of life.
Exactly. You become better equipped to handle challenges, to stay focused on your goals. It's like Ramadan becomes this training ground for facing the ups and downs of everyday life?
That makes a lot of sense. But that kind of willpower, that doesn't just magically appear, right? You have to put in the work. You have to prepare.
Absolutely. And this is where Dr. Mahana gets really practical. He talks about taking stock of your life before Ramadan even begins.
Like doing an inventory, right? Figuring out where you're at, what you need to work on.
Yeah. What are those things that pull you away from your goals? Your spiritual goals. Maybe it's social media, maybe it's certain foods, or even just negative thought patterns, right?
So it's not just the obvious stuff like overeating or staying up late. It's about identifying those subtle things that can drain your energy and focus.
Exactly. Ramadan is a chance to break free from those things, those distractions, and replace them with healthier habits, habits that bring you closer to God.
Like hitting the reset button.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, you take a stock of your life. What's next? What are some of the concrete things Dr. Mohanad recommends?
I'm glad you asked because this is where it gets really interesting.
So we've talked about some of those practical steps you can take to prepare it, like, gradually adjusting your diet or your sleep schedule. But now I really want to dig into the spiritual side of things. Like, how do we get our hearts and minds ready for Ramadan?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about too, because it can't just be about like checking off boxes, right? There's got to be more to it than that.
Exactly. And that's one of the things Dr. Mohanad emphasizes so strongly, the importance of setting intentions. He says you have to approach Ramadan with a clear sense of purpose. Like asking yourself, what do I want to get out of this month? Spiritually, I mean.
So it's not just going through the motions, like, okay, I'm fasting, I'm praying, but without really thinking about why.
Right. It's about making a conscious choice to use this time for growth. And that might mean different things for different people.
Of course, some people might focus on improving their prayer. Others might want to like really dive into the Quran and try to understand it better.
Exactly. And Dr. Mohanad encourages us to be specific with our goals. Instead of just saying, oh, I want to pray more, try setting a more concrete goal. Like, I'm going to pray all the Sunnah prayers consistently this Ramadan.
Let's see. So it's like those SMART goals you always hear about in like the self-help world, but applied to your spiritual life.
Exactly. And there's something powerful about articulating those intentions and then, actually making the effort to work towards them. It gives your actions more meaning, more weight.
So, all right, we've set our intentions. We have a plan. What's next? What else does Dr. Mohanad say we should be doing to prepare?
Well, he's really big on seeking knowledge. He says, we have to understand the why behind Ramadan, not just the what.
So it's not enough to just follow the rules to do the things you're supposed to do. You have to actually understand the deeper meaning behind them.
Exactly. So he encourages people to read books, listen to lectures, have those thoughtful discussions about the meaning of fasting and prayer and charity and all that.
And that knowledge, it shouldn't just stay in your head, right? It should actually impact how you experience Ramadan.
Right. He uses this analogy of a gardener. If you just plant seeds without understanding, like, what those plants need or the purpose of the garden, well, you might get some growth, but it won't be as vibrant, as fruitful.
I like that. It's like you need to cultivate that understanding so that the seeds you plant, those good beads and intentions, they can really flourish.
Exactly. And as you learn more, you start to see these connections, between your inner world and your outer actions.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he talks about how fasting, for example, isn't just about the food and drink. It's about cultivating self-control. And that self-control, it helps you control your anger, those negative thoughts that pop up, those desires that could lead you astray.
So it's like this ripple effect, like what you do with your body actually impacts your mind and your heart.
Yes. And as you become more aware of that connection, you start to see Ramadan as this time for like deep inner purification.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. But it makes sense, right? Like you're cleansing your heart and your mind alongside your body.
Exactly. And that purification process, according to Dr. Mohanad, it leads to something really special, a heightened sense of empathy and compassion.
Oh, interesting. How does that happen?
Well, think about it. When you experience hunger and thirst yourself, even if it's just for a short time, it helps you understand the struggles of people who face those challenges every single day.
Right, it makes it real.
It puts things into perspective, and it cultivates this deeper sense of gratitude for what you have and, a stronger desire to help those in need.
So we've talked about willpower, intention, seeking knowledge, purification, compassion. That's a lot. It seems like Ramadan really is this holistic experience that impacts every part of you.
It is, and that's what's so inspiring about Dr. Mahana's teachings. He's not just telling us to follow a bunch of rules. He's inviting us to use Ramadan as an opportunity to become the best versions of ourselves.
And that's something that can last beyond the month of Ramadan, right? Like, it doesn't just end when the fasting is over.
That's a great point. And that's actually what we're going to explore in our final segment. So stay tuned, listeners, because we're going to talk about how to carry the spirit of Ramadan with you throughout the entire year.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground already, right? Like building willpower, cultivating compassion, all that good stuff. But the big question is, how do we keep that going? How do we take that Ramadan energy, that momentum, and actually make it last once the month is over?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something Dr. Mohanad talks about quite a bit. He says the key is to think of Ramadan not so much as a destination, but more like a training ground.
Okay, I like that, a training ground.
Yeah.
But a training ground for what exactly?
Well, for life, basically, for living a more mindful life, more intentional life, one that's in line with your values and with God's guidance. And he says we should take those lessons we learned during Ramadan about discipline, gratitude, connection, all that, and weave them into our everyday lives, even after the fasting is done.
So it's not about like trying to replicate Ramadan exactly. It's more about holding on to that spirit, that essence, and letting it guide you.
Exactly. So let's say you've established a routine of reading Quran every day during Ramadan. Maybe afterwards you try to set aside even just 15 minutes a day to keep that connection going.
Right. Or if you've experienced that feeling of giving generously during Ramadan, maybe you commit to doing some kind of small act of charity on a regular basis.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to keep those good habits alive, even on a smaller scale, just to hold on to a little piece of that Ramadan spirit. And it's not just about individual practices either. Dr. Mahanad also emphasizes the importance of community. Those bonds that we build during Ramadan, those shared meals, those acts of service, we need to find ways to keep that going.
Right. Extend that sense of unity beyond just the month itself. Keep those connections strong.
Exactly. And then another thing Dr. Mohana talks about is the importance of reflection. Like after Ramadan is over, take some time to think about what you experienced. What insights did you gain? What challenges did you face? What surprised you?
It's like processing the whole thing.
Yeah. Journaling can be helpful. Or even just having those deep conversations with people you care about, to really solidify those lessons learned.
So it's like taking everything you learned during Ramadan, all that inner work you did, and using it to navigate the world around you with more purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking back on everything we've discussed today, it really strikes me how Dr. Mahanad's teaching on Ramadan, they're not just about Ramadan. They're actually teachings on how to live a better life.
Wow, that's so true. It's like he's using Ramadan as a jumping off point, right? Like a catalyst for positive change that can impact every part of your life.
Exactly. And so I guess our final thought for you today, listener, is this. What if you approached every single day with the same kind of intentionality and mindfulness that Dr. Mohanad encourages for Ramadan? Like, how would that change your choices, your relationships? How would it change the way you move through the world?
Ooh, that's a powerful question, and one we hope will stick with you. We know we've only just scratched the surface of Dr. Mohanad's teachings, but hopefully this deep dive has inspired you to start thinking about your own journey of preparation, not just for Ramadan, but for life itself.